They want you to believe that black people are fools for serving Jesus.
Serve one. Yeah. Aliens, baby. We don't belong here. Yo, check it out. Yo, too many people walk around.
What's going on, everybody? It's your boy Quantizi with the Christ of Christ, where we give you the biblical perspective on everything from politics to pop culture and help you be able to establish God's kingdom in the public square. So, a couple of weeks ago, a movie came out that we need to talk about. The Book of Clarence was written by and directed by James Samuel, produced by none other than Jay-Z and others, starring Lakeith Stanfield and a host of other people that you've seen in movies. This movie is set in the times of Jesus, around the end of his ministry, and it's about a character who is a riffraff, a ne'er-do-well sort of character that everybody likes, who is trying to come up and take himself out of the area in life that he is, and he finds himself in trouble by having to pay back a gangster in the town money that he owes him, and he's trying to figure out a way to do that before he gets caught and killed. The movie sets him up as an atheist, as someone who's not a believer, who thinks that the ministry of Jesus and his disciples is a fake racket in order to get some money. So what he does is he finally figures out, after trying several things, that, hey, I'm going to become the new Messiah so that I can make the money and fool the people so that I can get myself out of this situation and prove that I am somebody. So on the surface, it looks like a movie that is going to be mocking Jesus and mocking Christianity. And through the watching of the previews from a year ago, people were like, oh my goodness, this is going to be a terrible movie. We don't want to watch it because it's going to be, it's going to be mocking and blasphemous, which it was. But there's a twist. Throughout the movie, the character's story arc is where he changes from being, a riffraff or someone who is selfish and will do whatever he can by any means to pay off his debts and become rich and move his mom out of the house that they're in and win the love of the woman that he wants to impress and make himself seem like he is somebody, and he'll do anything to get that. He grows and then gets enlightened throughout the movie to where he becomes altruistic and willing to give his life for other people. But the means by which he does so is where the trick is. So like I said before, initially when the previews came out for this movie, all of Christianity deadpanned it and said it wasn't good because it looked like it was going to be blasphemous. And when it actually came out, though, a lot of Christian publications saw the movie and fell for the confusion that it produces. This movie is meant to be a confusing movie with an underlying tone of pulling black people away from Christianity. That's what this movie is about. So our protagonist in the movie, Clarence, becomes someone who needs to pay off a debt, and he's trying everything. He comes up with this great idea to become the 13th disciple, because in the movie it shows the disciples are these elite people that everybody respects and everybody moves out of the way, and they say it many times, nobody messes with the disciples, which was the furthest thing from the truth, first of all. But so he decides he wants to become the 13th disciple because maybe that'll stop the gangster from killing him. So he goes to the disciples, which, by the way, Thomas, one of the disciples, happens to be his twin brother. He goes to the disciples, even though he doesn't believe in Jesus at all as a Messiah, and he tries to convince the disciples that he is now worthy of being the 13th disciple to kind of piggyback off of their popularity and protection, according to the movie. The disciples laugh in his face. Judas says, okay, if you want to prove that you can be the 13th disciple, go ahead and tell the slave owner to free these slaves. And then if you can free these slaves and come back, then we'll think about it. So he agrees to this impossible task. And here's the key. This is what is very important and where the shift happens in the movie. He goes to talk to the slave owner, who happens to be black as well. The entire cast, all of them are black. And by the way, the slave owner, half of his face is painted white. And he's the only one in the movie with any face paint on like that. So that's symbolic. And he tells him, hey, in order for you to free your conscience of this atrocity of owning slaves, let them go. And Jesus is who sent me. And the slave owner obviously is like, nah, screw that. I'm not doing that. But hey, since you're so bold to do that, you can fight one of my gladiators and possibly win, some money or win the freedom of some of these people. So the character Clarence begins to change his mind about being someone who is a deceiver, who is just doing this for himself and money, to wanting to take care and help people by looking at and realizing the atrocity of slavery. It says in there, man should never own another man. This is key to remember because this is a hot button sore spot for most black people. The idea of slavery, and they use this to tap into that visceral emotion that a lot of black people in America have. So he decides to do that. He fights the slave guy and he wins, and the slave guy becomes his cohort, who happens to be Barabbas, by the way. And so they leave. He only gives them the freedom of Barabbas. He leave. They go back to the disciples. They say, no, that's not cool. Screw that. And then he reveals his true thoughts and says, you guys are all fools. All of you who serve Jesus, who follow Jesus, are all fools. And so he leaves, and he's trying to figure out that the next thing he does is he figures out that, hey, I'm going to be the next Messiah, because this is such a racket and such a game that gets so much money and respect. I'm going to be the next Messiah. How hard can it be? We'll fake some miracles, and I'll give a message and just kind of piggyback and bite some of his message and make it my own. And then it'll be it. So he sets out to do that, and his message is very dominant. His dominant message is knowledge is greater than belief. Knowledge is greater than belief. That is the undercurrent theme, that you do not have to have belief in order to have knowledge and to elevate yourself. So he preaches that. He starts to fake miracles. People start to believe him. They start putting money into his coffers, and they start collecting in different towns, and it's working. And he ends up making a whole bunch of money, right? So he's now proving that you can fool the people by, having fake miracles, telling a story, and having a aura about you, and people will believe you. And the slick and deceptive way that the movie does this is it correlates, it lets you, the viewer, make the connection between that and Christianity. It doesn't out and out say it, but it lets you make that connection. They do everything, lead you all the way up to the water, and then don't tell you what it is, but they make you thirsty, lead you to the water, and then want you to drink. So they make that connection psychologically that Christianity is false, that the miracles are false, and that knowledge is greater than belief, and that we should come out from that quote unquote belief and use our knowledge to elevate. And so it ends up to where he has the money, and now he's so torn between whether he should use the money to pay his debt off so he doesn't die, and torn between that and freeing all of the slaves, using the money, using what he's gained from quote unquote religion to free the slaves, to do what he thinks, or what the movie is telling you is what should happen with the advantages gained by living and using this racket called religion. So he decides, outside of having a heart change towards God or Jesus, he decides that he is now going to be altruistic and free these slaves. And because of that, he gains some divinity. Not that he surrenders his heart to the Lord and recognizes his need for God. He changes and does something good, and that allows him to have some divinity. And you see this in the movie. He ends up walking on water legitimately. Here's where the confusion is. So after he does that, then he acknowledges that there is something divine and that God is a possibility, that God is there. And so He then gets crucified just like the Lord does, because Rome in this movie is now looking for anyone who claims to be a Messiah, and it captures him, and he is crucified. Now let me rewind a little bit, just to kind of, they put the nail in the coffin, the period on a sentence. So throughout the movie, a little side story is there's this peasant throughout the movie. His face is just covered in soot and matted hair, and he's asking for alms throughout the movie, and everybody's ignoring him, right? Finally, Jesus, the character of Jesus, sees him and does a miracle and gives him a coin. And that coin miraculously turns into a bunch of coins, right? To this guy with matted hair and soot all on his face. So the black Jesus gives him the coin, helps him out. He goes to a salon and says, hey, I want to get cleaned up. This is the poor guy. And they clean him up. And while they're cleaning him up, and this matters, they have like wonderful music with strings and flat, great sound, and making it sound like it's a new day in the music. And you have the women cleaning him up and doing his toes and washing him and doing his hair. And at the end of this wonderful scene that seems to be shoehorned in, and the reason why it's shoehorned in is because they want a message to get across. You see the back of him. In the back of him, it's a lot of curly, very cleaned white person's hair with the white robe and a purple sash on. And he turns around and he looks exactly like what you would think the typical depiction of the white Jesus is. That has become the hated vision of black people, or people that are black, that want you to believe that, want you to believe that the quote unquote white Jesus is the actual devil. This guy now goes from being a peasant and still has the money, and now looks like the typical white Jesus that you see. And he's leaves the salon, and it's in slow motion, and there's this wonderful music playing, overly campy, wonderful music playing, and he's walking down the streets. And I remember the rest of everybody else in the cast are black, and everybody else is falling all over him. They are fawning over him, kissing his hand, shrinking back in awe of this white Jesus as he's walking down the street, right? And showing you the silliness that they say of black people who worship a false God. They're telling you that this idea of Jesus is false. That is the notion that they're giving you. Now, the reason why this is so slick is because the picture of the quote unquote white Jesus is a false picture. Like, Jesus was not a European. So that is true, but the way the enemy works is he always adds in a piece of poison to something that is true, so that he can poison you easily. And so the actual message that he's trying to get across is that you are a fool for following Jesus. You don't need Jesus in order to gain enlightenment. And that's what this movie is about. And that is the danger of this movie. Now, if you couple that message that the movie pushes all the way to the end, because believe it or not, they have scenes where Clarence is walking up a hill with a cross, getting beaten, and he is being tortured for his cause on the way to his crucifixion. Very determinedly reminiscent of what happened to Jesus. They have a scene where he's laid down and they nail his hands to the cross and nail his feet to the cross, reminiscent of what happened to Jesus, replacing what happened to Jesus. He gets lifted up. He gets stabbed in his side, replacing the iconography that happens to Jesus. And then they pan to the left and they see that they've crucified this fake Jesus as well. And I can't even repeat some of the things that he says. Just to solidify the notion that Christianity that you know of is not needed and not true and not right. I'm telling you guys, this movie flew under the radar. It didn't do a whole bunch of numbers, but it doesn't have to. The enemy is slick. If you couple that along with the rise of these black pastors, especially here in Atlanta, who have decidedly gone in an opposite direction of what the Bible actually says about Jesus and what we're supposed to believe, and mixing and confusing the flock, who most of their flock happen to be black people. Couple that with this movie and other things, and the knowledge that the enemy takes baby steps towards his deceit. He will play the long game, and people like myself and others, it's our job to expose this. So I would suggest that, if you want to see for yourself what I'm saying, go ahead and check this movie out, but understand that they are coming from a particular point of view, and you'll see what I'm saying. That's all we got for you today. I want to make sure that we are all equipped and understanding what is going on in these things so that we can better talk about these things to people when they are contemplating whether or not they should serve Jesus or not, especially as black people. This is important for black people, for white people, everybody, because the body of Christ needs to understand what the enemy's tricks are. And this is what the Christ of Christ is about. We're here to expose the good, the bad, and the ugly so that you and I can better deal with these things that are in the public square, which a big part of it is entertainment. Make sure you like and subscribe the channel. Make sure that you comment below. Let me know what you think. If you've seen the movie, do you agree? Do you disagree? Let us know. Check us out. Make sure that you are doing everything that you can to have yourself educated and informed so that you can help establish the kingdom of God on earth as it is in heaven. Remember, we don't shrink back. Like and subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one.